And the panel will speak to Agroecology for food systems transformation. And we have several panelists and we're waiting for a few as well. And we'll have some concluding comments. We would really like to preserve some time for questions from all of you as well. So let me introduce together our first two panelists, and then I'll introduce our first two speakers, and then I'll introduce the other panelists after their remarks. Tyler Short, here on my right, is an outgoing member of the Coordination Committee and Advisory Group for the Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism. Since 2021, Tyler has been co-coordinating the CSIPM Youth Constituency as a representative of the International Peasant Movement La Via Campesina. He lives in Kentucky, US, where he practices agroecology for subsistence purposes and as an employee on a small scale farm that he was just telling me produces vegetables primarily, although he gets to move the cows once in a while. And here in the bio, also meat and flowers for local markets. So really thrilled that you could join us, Tyler. And then we'll hear from Madeline Kaufman, who is Senior Policy Advisor of the Federal Office for Agriculture. And since 2018, she represents Switzerland in the Committee on World Food Security here. Among others, she's the Swiss focal point of the Agroecology Coalition that emerged from the UN Food Systems Summit and represents the European Regional Group in the steering committee of the coalition. In addition to her employment at FOAG, Madeline works part-time on a dairy farm. Before joining the FOAG, Madeline worked for several international cooperation and development organizations, including GIZ, CABI, Bioversity International, Helvetis Swiss Intercooperation. So before turning it over to our speakers, I'll just say a few words about the group that's come together to organize this. We have the Agroecology Coalition, who has also been supporting this conversation around investment in agroecology. We have IFOAM, Organics, WWF, the Agroecology Fund, and my organization, the Global Alliance for the Future of Food. So together, we're really thrilled to host this conversation. Tyler, I'll pass it over to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting the CSIPM to engage in this side event. My intervention is an attempt to bring my experiences in agroecology from home to Rome. The main message that I want to convey is that measures to finance agroecology should recognize small-scale food producers as political subjects, respect our autonomous forms of self-organization, prioritize inclusion of our grassroots social movements in policymaking processes, and directly support our work on the ground based on mutually agreed terms. Agroecology is not only a science and a set of sustainable agricultural practices. Agroecology is a form of resistance to an economic system that puts profit before life. Agroecology is a vehicle for the radical transformation of food and agricultural systems. Peasants, indigenous peoples, women, and youth are the leading protagonists of agroecological transitions. Our daily work involves challenging and transforming structures of power in society. We are part of an internationalist struggle to cool the planet and feed the world. I have been producing food since 2015, and I love farming for several reasons. In my work, I'm constantly learning. My body is getting stronger. I connect intimately with nature. I love to eat what I nurture and harvest, and I'm proud to feed people in my community. I am proud to be a young peasant. On the small-scale farm where I work, my activities are mostly focused in vegetable production. We sell our products directly to consumers each Saturday at a local farmers market. We also distribute through a community-supported agriculture model. Our agroecological methods increase biodiversity, enhance soil health, and recycle nutrients from crops and livestock to avoid dependency on external inputs. My understanding of agroecology has largely been informed by participating in La Via Campesina. We conduct internal trainings to share experiences from our territories. We also produce political education materials to massify this knowledge. Peasant-to-peasant exchanges are crucial for us to combine theory and practice. Horizontal social processes open space for all involved to contribute knowledge and skills. These processes are based on a dialogue of different knowledges and different ways of knowing. They also involve intergenerational connections. Farm visits and capacity building trainings allow us to tangibly learn about the real solutions that our communities are practicing. The co-creation and sharing of knowledge lead to a multiplier effect, whereby promoters of agroecology implement practical lessons to feed ourselves and address context-specific challenges related to poverty, gender inequalities, climate change, and environmental degradation. Our trainings in La Via Campesina also allow us to learn about the false solutions promoted by powerful corporations and governments. So-called nature-based solutions and approaches considered innovative, like climate-smart agriculture, sustainable intensification, and carbon farming, are false solutions because they extract and further concentrate wealth and power. They continue to poison and displace communities, and they reduce the climate crisis to a crisis of carbon, which could purportedly be solved through technological fixes. Agroecology is incompatible with so-called nature-based solutions. Focusing heavily on the carbon reduction or sequestration potential of agriculture ignores the wider ecological, social, and economic justice elements of agroecology. Instead of advancing the democratic and systemic change that is so urgently needed, there is a growing tendency in multi-stakeholder spaces to promote only a few techniques and practices that do not challenge the underlying causes of the food and climate crises. The use and promotion of agrotoxins, genetic engineering, and digitalization maintain the status quo of corporate control over food and agriculture. La Via Campesina opposes these false solutions and demands that states implement real solutions that we bring to confront the problems faced by peasants and workers around the world. Food sovereignty is the right of peoples to healthy and culturally appropriate food produced through ecologically sound and sustainable methods. Food sovereignty is our right to democratically define and control our own food and agricultural systems. Under the framework of food sovereignty, the transformative potential of agroecology can truly be realized. Public policies aimed at respecting, fulfilling, and protecting the human right to food must be central to any measure for financing agroecology. Comprehensive and genuine agrarian reforms are needed. Equitable redistributive measures are especially relevant for achieving gender equality and addressing youth migration out of the countryside. Scaling agroecology will require concerted efforts to fully implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Peasants and other people working in rural areas. In conclusion, La Via Campesina, we say, globalize the struggle, globalize hope. This is much more than a slogan. It is a call to action and a strong reminder that without hope, it's hard to find the motivation to stay committed to our work in the fields, in our communities, and in policy debates. Faced with global crises, we must build food sovereignty to ensure a future for humanity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyler. We really appreciate you joining us. And also for us, it's really wonderful to have the CSIPM supporting and participating in this conversation. Madeline.
Thank you, Lauren, for the floor, and to the organizers for this invitation to this very timely and interesting event. We need more farmers at the policy table, especially young farmers, young women and men that bring concrete and scalable solutions to the multiple overlapping crises we are facing. And so I'm very pleased to be able to speak today after Tyler that has set the scene so impressively. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, sustainable, resilient, healthy and inclusive food systems are urgently needed. And without the transformation towards such food systems, it will be impossible to successfully address the various interrelated crises and their impact on so many things: food security, malnutrition, health, climate change, biodiversity loss, land degradation, conflicts. Recognizing this, Switzerland sees agroecology as a crucial approach to strengthen the resilience of food systems and to achieve the necessary transformation towards more sustainable food systems. As a systems approach, agroecology addresses the various parts of our food systems from production to consumption, but also at various scales, so from farm, field, to landscape, to food systems. And I just want to say agroecology in its different components, it's not a new approach, but it has been brought into renewed focus because of the need to transform our food systems, and I think that's a good thing. I'm personally convinced that food systems transformation is a whole of a society task that requires engagement and effective participation of all actors and across all sectors. And this being said, at national level, we use the agroecological principles to ensure policy coherence and further develop our Swiss agriculture policy. Last year, the government released a report on the future orientation of Switzerland's agriculture policy beyond 2030. And maybe the biggest adjustments that we are seeking to do is that the Swiss agriculture policy now should evolve into a food systems policy, taking up the central element of the agroecological approach, so to really have a systemic and integrated food systems lens. Furthermore, and this was also the first time in history, the report was developed in form of an intensive co-creation process, a key element of the agroecological approach. So all the central actors of the Swiss agriculture food system were involved, from agriculture production to food processors, civil society, private sector, to discuss how this food policy should be designed. Also, the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation is currently designing a new program on agroecology with African and Asian partners, and we are looking forward to its launch. Thus, the agroecological principles can provide an enabling framework for implementation to happen in a systemic way. That's also why the agroecological principles can be well aligned with the means of implementation in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, the United Nations Conventions to combat desertification, and we should also bring coherence between the nationally determined contribution and food systems action plans. Following the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that you all know that in Target 10 is also referring to agroecology, governments are updating national biodiversity strategies and action plans to set the goals for biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. And it is really essential that these national plans also take into account food systems. And Switzerland plans a process for the revision of our National Biodiversity Action Plan starting next year to cover the phase 2025 to 2030. Agroecology is also crucial to achieve national commitments on climate change. Last month, the Swiss Federal Offices for Environment, Agriculture and Food Safety and Veterinary Services in Switzerland published a new climate strategy for agriculture and food, and the strategy takes into account also the agroecological approach. No intervention to build sustainable food systems is a silver bullet. Agroecology is no exception here. According to a discussion paper by our Swiss National FAO Committee published in 2019, Key challenges relate, among others, to insufficient systems research or also higher transaction costs, just to name a few. But it was also concluded that many of these challenges can be overcome with targeted actions and investments. Thus, boosting finance in agroecology would greatly accelerate the food systems transformation necessary to achieve Rio Convention targets on climate, biodiversity, and desertification. And I'm really looking forward to the next speaker to discuss this important element on finance. Let me close by saying that I was impressed by Mr. Mayaki's testimony yesterday, the African Union Special Envoy for Food Systems, during the Global Interlinkages Dialogue in the plenary, saying that he thinks institutionally we are not fit enough to tackle the interlinkages. We are not fit enough in terms of the management of these interlinkages. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get fit. We need to. And the food systems lens grounded in agroecology is a powerful response to address the interlinkages of the Rio Convention, connecting climate change agendas, the biodiversity framework, land degradation neutrality targets, the SDGs, and global health strategies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madeleine. That was fantastic. Thank you both, Tyler and Madeleine, for setting the stage and the scene for us as we have the conversation about how investment can create the enabling conditions for agroecology to flourish. Before I move on to the panel, I just want to say a few words about what we know about the funding flows to agroecology and sort of make the case with the numbers. And I'll speak really briefly because we're a little bit behind in the time, but I think this is important. The first thing to understand in relationship to the finance is what are the kind of costs. And we have two kinds of costs, I think, that we need to consider. The first is a cost of the externalities of the current system, which we know are very large. So some have estimated those costs to be between $12 and $19 trillion. And the new FAO SOFA report that will be released in about 2 weeks will provide more information on the cost of the externalities. And these externalities are systemic, and I won't say more about them because I think we're all familiar with the externalities of the current agriculture and food system. Externalities related to hunger, malnutrition, environmental damage, lost worker productivity, et cetera. The other cost in the system is the cost of transition. And that cost, of course, is very large as well, maybe between $250 billion to $450 billion a year. However, that cost is a fraction of the cost of externalities, maybe under 2%. So we need to keep these things in mind. Every investment in transition will immediately mediate the cost of the externalities. So those are the costs. Where do we understand money to be in the system? We, of course, have subsidies, and this costly system is supported by about $630 billion of annual global agricultural subsidies, about 60% of which are actually investing in the most harmful or supporting the most harmful and distortive environmental outcomes. So one of the key strategies, I think, for us as investors and donors is to think about how to shift those subsidies toward agroecology. Right now, the investment in agroecology is simply not enough. We have investments, of course, from philanthropy. We have investments from cooperation finance institutions, from the private sector, and from the public sector. Those investments total about $40 billion. And so if you do the math there, briefly, we're about 10 times underinvested than we need to be. So that's a challenge for all of us as donors to really make the case for investments that the investment that is needed to create enabling conditions for agroecology to flourish. And I just want to say, you know, this is an integrated strategy. Madeleine and Tyler, you both said this very well. You know, an investment in agroecology helps us meet the global targets that we've set for ourselves in relationship to the Sustainable Development Goals, the climate targets, and our biodiversity goals. So this is really significant, and I think we need to be tracking these numbers, and we need to be held accountable to our investments, and Emile Frison will speak to that in a few minutes. And so now I'd like to hear from the rest of our panel, and in this session we're going to talk about boosting finance to further support agroecology for food systems transformation. We have several panelists. I'll start with Victor Suarez, who is Deputy Minister of Agriculture, Undersecretary for Self-Sufficiency in the Government of Mexico, also founder of ANEC, a major agricultural association, National Association of Rural Commercialization Enterprises in Mexico. I'm going to just provide abbreviated bios because we're short on time. But we're thrilled, Mr. Suarez, that you're here. We have Jasmine Handorf with the German Development Cooperation Agency, GIZ. She's a senior advisor for agroecology and nature positive rural development, and has more than 10 years experience working in international cooperation, also with UNEP. And then we have Emile Frison, who is a member and founder of IPES Food Panel, the International Panel of Experts on Food Systems, and a senior advisor to the Agroecology Coalition. And he was for many years, of course, with Biodiversity International. So after we hear from our three panelists, we'll take a break and have questions from all of you and from those of you online. I know there are about 60 or more people joining us online for this conversation. So Mr. Victor Suarez, thank you very much. Over to you.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días a todos, a todas. Una disculpa por el retraso y ante todo felicitar a los organizadores de este evento paralelo, que me parece que es de los más importantes, si no es que el más importante que ha sucedido en el marco de esta 51 sesión del Comité de Seguridad Alimentaria Mundial, porque está enfocado a la vía para el cumplimiento de los objetivos del desarrollo sustentable de manera coherente y no de manera lateral o de manera marginal, sino enfoca hacia el camino estructural para avanzar efectivamente al cumplimiento de los objetivos del desarrollo sostenible. Solamente diría muy rápidamente que en México estamos llevando a cabo una transición agroecológica como una política pública prioritaria, y hablo como transición agroecológica, como un proceso de cambio gradual que responde de manera diferente a condiciones diferentes de tipo de productores, de cadenas agroalimentarias, de regiones del país, pero que tiene claramente una dirección de cambio para dejar atrás un modelo de agricultura y alimentación que desde todas las dimensiones es un modelo obsoleto y un modelo contraproducente en los aspectos sociales, productivos, ambientales y de salud. Rápidamente decir que llevamos a cabo algunos programas centrales de la transición, como es el programa Producción para el Bienestar a mi cargo, que apoya a 2 millones de pequeños y medianos productores de granos básicos, café, cacao, caña de azúcar y miel, que trabajan en 5 millones de hectáreas, y en este programa se canalizan apoyos económicos por un orden de $900 millones por año, y que no solamente es el apoyo económico directo al productor, al pequeño productor, sino sobre todo, es donde yo pongo el mayor énfasis, con una estrategia de acompañamiento técnico con los productores en una estrategia de diálogo de saberes, de campesino a campesino, para apoyar la transición hacia la agroecología, integrando los conocimientos campesinos con los conocimientos científicos, tecnológicos avanzados. Este programa también favorece el acceso a financiamiento en condiciones preferenciales para esos productores. El segundo programa importante es el programa llamado Sembrando Vida, que apoya a 500,000 pequeños productores de hasta 2,5 hectáreas en un sistema de recuperación de terrenos abandonados, de acahuales o de pastizales depredados, para establecer un sistema de reforestación bajo el modelo agroforestal. Cultivos anuales, cultivos frutícolas, cultivos forestales, que en conjunto generan más de 1 millón de hectáreas bajo este sistema. A cada productor, o que se le llama sembrador de vida, se le apoya con un sueldo mensual de alrededor de $300. Mes a mes, mes a mes, mes a mes, junto con el acompañamiento técnico para la transición agroecológica. Desde el inicio no se aceptan uso de agrotóxicos ni demás, 100% va en dirección de la agroecología, producción local de insumos, etcétera. Ese es el segundo programa, y este programa tiene una inversión de $2,100 millones. Estos dos programas entonces son los dos programas principales para la transición agroecológica en México. Asociado a esto está el programa de compras gubernamentales a pequeños productores de maíz, frijol, trigo, arroz y a leche a precios de garantía. Y es importante, este programa tiene una inversión de $1,000 millones. Paralelamente, el CONACYT, la entidad de ciencia y tecnología en México, apoya de manera central toda la estrategia de transición agroecológica, y en particular establece un proyecto de sustitución de glifosato y de masificación de las prácticas agroecológicas. Todo esto se complementa con programas de bienestar en zonas rurales, transferencias directas no condicionadas, que tienen en el sector rural una inversión de alrededor de $8,000 millones, y acciones de inclusión financiera y de conectividad a telecomunicaciones e internet gratuito para todos. Este avance que llevamos en México también de la transición agroecológica en los sistemas de producción agroalimentaria se inscribe también, y es muy importante, en una visión de transformación de los sistemas agroalimentarios y nutricionales, para dejar atrás los sistemas que se impusieron en México de productos ultraprocesados y bebidas con alto contenido de azúcar añadida, para transformar todo el sistema agroalimentario en México con una visión de derechos humanos y de integralidad e intersectorialidad, para avanzar a un sistema justo, saludable y sustentable. Para eso se conformó un sistema intersecretarial que se llama GISAMAC, Grupo Intersecretarial de Salud, Alimentación y Medio Ambiente. Entre otras acciones de transformación ha estado el etiquetado frontal de advertencia en alimentos y bebidas ultraprocesados, el decreto presidencial sobre maíz transgénico, glifosato y agroecología, la Ley de Ambientes Escolares Saludables, la Ley General de Alimentación Adecuada Sustentable, una campaña nacional de alimentación adecuada, y en curso la reglamentación para la prohibición de plaguicidas altamente peligrosos. Yo no sé cuánto tengo tiempo, pero no sé si puedo hablar una parte más. Bueno, perdón. ¿Por qué seguir invirtiendo en agroecología como política de Estado? Tenemos que contextualizar que el modelo de revolución verde, el modelo de agricultura industrial, se estableció, digamos, en los años 50 hasta la fecha como modelo hegemónico. Son 60, 70 años donde todas las agencias multilaterales, todas las grandes fundaciones, todos los gobiernos nacionales y los gobiernos subnacionales se dedicaron a invertir y a promocionar ese modelo. Quiero decir que, por lo tanto, la transición, dejar atrás ese modelo y avanzar, no va a ser ni en el corto plazo, ni con esfuerzos aislados, sino también, por eso me parece importante esta iniciativa, con unos esfuerzos que integren todas las capacidades de las naciones, de las agencias, de los mecanismos de financiación, porque la transición pues va a ser lenta y no va a ser de resultados inmediatos, porque muchas veces los opositores a la agroecología dicen, a ver, ¿dónde está la productividad? ¿Dónde está el resultado? Bueno, ellos tuvieron décadas de inversión pública, por ejemplo, en sistemas de riego. ¿Por qué son productivas ciertas regiones? Porque el Estado mexicano, en este caso, invirtió décadas en sistemas de riego. Esos sistemas de riego producen 4 o 5 veces más que los que no tienen riego. Es inversión pública. Y así décadas de investigación, de asistencia técnica, de financiamiento. Entonces sí tenemos que conceptualizar que necesitamos una política duradera, una visión de largo plazo, pero con la certeza de que es el único camino para avanzar en una agricultura que, a la vez que produzca alimentos, produzca justicia, produzca sustentabilidad, produzca salud y también produzca anclaje de la población en las zonas rurales, en las comunidades rurales. Por eso quisiera yo decir que es muy importante esta iniciativa, que debe dedicar mucho, desde luego sí, invertir abajo en las organizaciones locales, procesos locales, pero también es muy importante asegurar el cambio de las políticas públicas a nivel de los estados nacionales y también de los estados y de los organismos multilaterales, porque, por ejemplo, la FAO no está clara en esta definición, es ambigua, o más que ambigua, es clara la posición de este organismo en favor de la continuidad de la agricultura industrial y de la revolución verde, como lo muestra el convenio que firmó con CropLife. Hay conflicto de intereses, no hay definiciones claras. Y este es el momento de definiciones, no hay lugar para la ambigüedad. Entonces, es importante invertir también para que desde los organismos sociales y movimientos sociales se pueda incidir al cambio de las políticas públicas nacionales, porque es ahí donde está la mayor parte de los recursos necesarios para la transformación. Gracias.
Please go ahead, Jasmine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation to today's session. And I have the very challenging task today to sum up, to summarize, to share the main findings of the donor meeting that Lauren mentioned at the very beginning of this meeting, where we came together with about 70 representatives from different donor institutions. We also had leading countries at the table. We were honored to have Victor Suarez there at the meeting, but we also had representatives from Tanzania, Burkina Faso, from the European Commission, and from India, sharing their case and the need for strategic investment in agroecology. We had multilateral institutions, private foundations, and also impact investors. So I hope I can convey today the energy that was there in the room last weekend. As Lauren also mentioned, we started this process with 20 engaged institutions, and we were now more than 70. So we could clearly see this increasing interest by the donor and funding community in agroecology, also the commitment with the concept, but also many questions ahead. So also Lauren mentioned this huge gap of finance that is missing for a sustainable and just transition of agri-food systems through agroecology. We had very positive signals. There is a growing number of national agroecology strategies in all different parts of the world. We had the examples in the coalition. We have European countries in the Americas, in Africa, in Asia, all working on their national policies and strategies on agroecology. That is very encouraging. And we have this increasing interest of donors in understanding better how this maybe slightly new and complicated process of investing in systemic approaches could be coordinated. I can just speak for the German Development Corporation. BMZ has doubled its efforts in investment in agroecology from 2018 to 2020. It is firmly mentioned in our coalition's agreement to go ahead. So this is just one of the different donors with a clear compromise on investing in agroecology. We had IFOAM there on board in the meeting that mentioned that about 60% of IFOAM's investment is already on agroecology. So that is definitely very positive signals. On the other hand, and the previous speakers mentioned that, we have a situation of multiple crises. We have a security crisis in many parts of the world, including Europe, and this is putting funding under stress. So what did we come up to, or what did we discuss at this meeting with the 70+ donor and investment institutions? First of all, we were aware of a challenge we are confronted with. And this has been mentioned before, that agroecology is a multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder approach. It encompasses from health to education to agriculture, biodiversity, climate, so many different sectors. So investing in such a multi-sector approach from the production level up to consumption can be challenging when we compare it to actual project cycles that are very often just 3 to 5 years. So how could we as funding and investor community better work on this challenge of long-term investment that is needed for transition versus at the time being sometimes very short-term projects that are out there. So that was a challenge clearly identified. We listened to a powerful example from Andhra Pradesh, where it was shared that starting from a very small investment based on trust and respect for this approach of natural farming, showing impacts of this natural farming in Andhra Pradesh was used then to later attract bigger investment by bigger donors. So that was a very successful story that was shared at the meeting, also motivating, but we need more. We really need to scale up this positive examples. And then, as in all investments in agriculture, in the face of climate change, of course, there's a certain risk attached to investment in agroecology. So that is why the collaboration between public and private is so important here, because this is about public goods also. So we need the first investment by public donors. I'm not only speaking about the international donors, they are important, but also national finance institutions, national finance plans of the respective donor countries. And then when we ensure these grants and we ensure the transition period, then it will also be easier for private investors to come in. So we need to strengthen this collaboration. And then in summary, Everybody is talking about food systems transformation, agri-food systems transformation, about integrated solutions, about systemic change. We need this bold change regarding the challenges ahead, but of course the finance need to be adapted accordingly. So that was our homework we are taking with us from this meeting. There is a whole ecosystem of funders. It is national funds, it is donor countries, it is multilateral institutions, it is the community of private foundations and philanthropy, it is international institutions, but we are not coordinated well enough. How can we use our respected advantages based on national priorities and coordinate these funding better? So some of the concrete aspects that need to be further strengthened in these groups are further improve the networking, use shared metrics so that we can better compare, use shared evaluations of this way, because it is again something new that we as a donor community try to invest in systemic approaches, and also use institutions like the Agroecology Coalition for this matchmaking of countries interested in agri or that want to embark on the agroecology transformation path, and other institutions that may have the funds for it, and how can we bring this together in a coordinated way. We also need more people and players on board. It is an increasing community that is that is great to notice, but we need to strengthen further the business case and private investment also in agroecological transformation. And we need to continue strengthening our links with the communities of the other Rio conventions, the biodiversity, climate change, and also land degradation. Because at the end of the day, we are looking for the same objectives. We are trying to reach the same objectives. So again, this is an opportunity to connect and work together. And finally, which was also noted, is sometimes it is not only about more money. Sometimes it's also about investing the money better. So this is where agroecology and the discussion on repurposing play together, because it is important. Lauren mentioned the figures of harmful subsidies that are still out there today. So how can we also better invest the money that is in the system already towards public goals such as the agroecology transformation, and thereby supporting the farmers that are safeguarding biodiversity and the services nature provides. So we concluded that the agroecology that is already established and growing will be a really good mechanism to continue this work and to take our homework with us to work more concretely on this alignment and coordination. We know, and it has been mentioned today, that farmers and social movements have been working on agroecology for a really long time already, that they have been organizing themselves. But here at the CFS, it is not only farmers getting together, but also many people from the finance and donor community. So what can we do better? I think it is a task that has often been overlooked, that we can coordinate better. We can use the advantages of different donors in the ecosystem of funding agroecology more systematically. We can build upon each other's experiences, and I think it is our task also to move forward on this alignment and coordination exercise in these times of multiple crises. CFS can be one forum to do so, and we are happy to take part in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And as Emil comes to the podium, he'll share some slides. Maybe we could pause and express appreciation for the leadership of Mexico, of Germany, and of Switzerland. I just want to say this is really extraordinary and so much appreciated. So thank you very much. Over to you, Emil.
Thank you, Lauren, and good morning, everybody. Since the Agroecology Symposium that was held here at FAO in 2018, there have been several attempts to look how much money actually is going to agroecology, and we know that that amount is not very impressive yet, as Lauren has mentioned. Various initiatives have been taken by either researchers that were looking into what some donor agencies were investing in agroecology, but also organizations that were analyzing their own portfolio of projects to see how much of their investments are actually contributing to an agroecological transformation. FAO started that process very early on. IFAT has embarked on that, several bilateral donor agencies and the European Commission, for example, and they often use slightly different approaches to try to see how much their investment are contributing to an agroecological transformation. And about a year and a half ago, we brought together a group of people that have been involved in these various efforts to try to come up with a common methodology that would make it easier to compare data between what different donors or researchers have been using in order to assess how much funding is actually contributing. And so that resulted in what I'm presenting here today, an agroecology financing assessment tool, which can be used by donors, investors, and organizations to analyze their own portfolio, but also for other purposes, as I will mention. The information about the tool can be found on the Agroecology website. This is the part of the homepage that is allowing you to get information on that. So why should we be assessing that? And essentially, it is to document the evolution of investments in agroecology in order to foster greater investments. If we don't know how much is actually being invested in agroecological transformation, it's difficult to argue for more. We need to better understand agroecology also and provide a guide for project proposal development or initiative development, and for the formulation also of calls for proposals by donors, so that they are really more and more oriented towards and in support of a real agroecological transformation. So it's to guide investments in agroecological transformations more generally. This first framework has been developed by a group of scientists, donors, civil society actors coming together, and you see the logos of the various organizations that contributed to this effort at the bottom of the slide. And it is based on the 13 principles of agroecology developed by the high-level panel of experts of the Committee on World Food Security, which are aligned with the 10 elements of agroecology adopted by FAO and member countries. The tool that is based on this framework has been developed by Stats for Sustainable Development, which is a not-for-profit organization in open source software so that it can be available to everybody. And it is based on analyzing project proposals. So it's not looking at the impact of a particular project after it has been implemented. It is trying to assess how much a project is likely to contribute to an agroecological transformation. And it's primarily aimed at project portfolio analysis. But as I said, it can also serve other purposes. For example, the analysis of proposals that are being received by donors or investors. The characteristics of the tool is that institutions join this platform and they enter their own data, and the data is only available to that institution. So those data are not becoming public. What will be public is anonymized reports based on an aggregate analysis that will be published. So we can see the evolution of funding, but the institutions that participate, that join the platform, will be the only ones that have access to the detailed, their own detailed data. The assessment is based on a two-step process. The first one is by, once you've gone through a project proposal, is to see whether there are any red flags. These are things that are obviously against an agroecological transformation. And if that is the case, you can stop there. You don't have to analyze things in detail any further. But then the second step, assuming that there are no red flags that are being identified, is to evaluate each of the 13 principles. And then there is also a possibility for organizations or institutions that participate to add their own evaluation criteria if they have to report on other things than the 13 principles. Institutionally, they can add their own criteria so that they don't have to set up parallel systems and duplicate the work. So the first step, as I said, is to look whether there are any red flags. There are 10 that we have identified, and I just give one example. If a project is focusing essentially on increasing the inputs of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, it's obviously not aligned with an agroecological transformation. It is not compatible with that, and therefore, you, if that is a yes there, that is present, then you don't have to do any further analysis of the proposal. It will not contribute any at all to an agroecological transformation. So there are 10 of these which you will find on the website. Then the second step is to look one by one each of the 13 principles and assess how much the project is contributing to the implementation of that principle. Some of these principles may not be applicable to a certain project. For example, if we're talking about a project to improve the policy framework and there's no animals involved in that project, then the principle about animal health is not applicable. And therefore, it should not influence the overall rating that you give to the project. So, but there are 4 principles that are always applicable, that you cannot say it's not applicable. And that is essentially about participation. If there's no participation, that has to be having an influence on your overall rating. The same for co-creation of knowledge, about fairness and social values and diets. So, as I said, the next step is to go one by one through the 13 principles. And I just take one example here. This is about soil health. You do the rating on a scale from 0 to 2, and we give a definition of what it means to have a rating of 2, and also what it means to have a rating of 0. And in addition, there are concrete examples of things that contribute to the implementation of that project. So that's very useful to help with the assessment. So you do that for each of the 13 principles, and then you can project the results in the form of a spider diagram. In this case, for example, animal health was not applicable, so the 0 that is there doesn't mean that it performs bad, but that it was not applicable, and that's indicating indicated at the bottom of the screen. They're saying this was not applicable. Then there are various ways of analyzing your results, comparing your results with the average results of all the institutions that are in the system. You can do it by country, by region, etc. There's multiple ways of analyzing and projecting the results. So just to finish, the framework is also very useful to help people design projects and initiatives by looking at how they can contribute, they can make sure that the project will contribute to each of the 13 principles. And we have developed a PDF version of the framework that is available on the website that can help, as I said, to develop project proposals, but also for donors to formulate calls for proposals and make sure that their portfolio will contribute more to an agroecological transformation. So with that, I thank you, and I hope that many will use the framework and the guide. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Emile, and for all the work on the tracking tool. It's so great to have that. I think we have time for a couple of questions. We do have some questions from our online participants, and I'll start there. And maybe we'll take 2 questions from the room, 2 questions from those that have been posed online. So my first question, the first question here is for Victor Suarez, and this is a great question. What should the role of international trade in a transformed and agroecological food systems be? What are the implications for the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, WTO, et cetera?
Say them all.
Okay, I can say one more question, which is for Tyler. So these are the 2 from the online. I mean, essentially the question, Tyler, is, you know, how do we convince the mainstream? You're from Kentucky. The question was posed as, how do we leave the agroecology bubble and convince the mainstream? So those are the 2 questions from our online participants. Victor, over to you.
Recordar que el modelo de tratados de libre comercio es un modelo que responde a la expansión del control corporativo de los mercados globales, eliminando las barreras a la expansión del capital corporativo. Y entonces lo que necesitamos son 2 cosas, de mi punto de vista. 1, revisar las partes lesivas de estos tratados de libre comercio, pero por otro lado, abrir una era, una etapa de otro tipo de tratados de cooperación entre los países, que serían tratados de cooperación para el desarrollo, en el que el interés público y el interés de las naciones y de los pueblos esté en el centro. Es lo que hemos querido hacer nosotros en México con países de origen de migraciones como en Centroamérica, el propio sur de nuestro país, estableciendo inversiones públicas multinacionales para atacar las causas que originan la migración. La migración no se va a frenar con muros, ni con policías, ni con ejército, sino resolviendo las causas que originan la migración, y que es la falta de oportunidades de desarrollo, de vida, de bienestar en sus localidades. Entonces, necesitamos tener acuerdos de colaboración entre países para el desarrollo de la gente, de los pueblos, con justicia. Entonces, esto es lo que tenemos que hacer. La era de los tratados de libre comercio debe acabarse, porque es una era que no ha propiciado desarrollo, sino ha propiciado desigualdad, ha propiciado enorme concentración de poderes que se sobreponen a los poderes democráticos de los países. Son poderes antidemocráticos y son poderes que su objetivo central es la ganancia a cualquier costo, la ganancia a costo de la justicia, de la salud, de la sustentabilidad, incluso ganancia a costo de la paz y la seguridad alimentaria, de los derechos humanos. Entonces, la era de que quien define qué es lo mejor para los pueblos son las corporaciones, pues eso ya se acabó, ya fueron demasiados años desde el consenso de Washington, pues a la fecha, ya esto ya está en crisis. Entonces, sugiero, pues, para no ser tan abruptos, los tratados de libre comercio deben renegociarse y eliminar las obligaciones que son lesivas al interés de las naciones y a los derechos humanos. Una de esas obligaciones son los paneles de controversias en donde las empresas pueden contraponerse a los estados en función de decisiones que tomen los estados para el bien público, como es la controversia que estamos enfrentando porque nuestro gobierno estableció un decreto presidencial para proteger la diversidad de maíces nativos en México, prohibir la siembra de maíz transgénico, para eliminar gradualmente el glifosato y avanzar hacia la agroecología. Bueno, pues eso fue objetado en el marco del Tratado de Libre Comercio México, Estados Unidos y Canadá, porque pues en Estados Unidos, primero, pues los congresistas son financiados por las empresas para hacer sus campañas y ganar las elecciones. Ya que llegan ahí, pues están defendiendo el interés de las corporaciones de los que financiaron a esos legisladores y no el interés público. Y a su vez los congresistas presionan al gobierno de los Estados Unidos, que llegó por el mismo procedimiento, financiado por los grandes intereses corporativos. Entonces, tanto los gobiernos como los congresos sirven a los intereses corporativos y para eso tienen los tratados de libre comercio, para que si ven afectados sus intereses puedan establecer controversias, puedan judicializar las controversias y llevarlas a paneles privados de solución de controversias, que es lo que estamos enfrentando ahora. Entonces, ese tipo de cuestiones deben salir adelante, el tipo de obligaciones para que los países se suscriban al UPOF 91, por ejemplo, y otro tipo de cuestiones lesivas. Sí importa mantener reglas de comercio, comercio justo. Entonces, yo solo diría renegociar las partes lesivas de los tratados comerciales existentes y dos, avanzar hacia un nuevo modelo, una nueva etapa de tratados o acuerdos de cooperación para el desarrollo.
Thank you very much. Tyler.
Thank you. I'm really grateful for the question. I think I would say how to convince the mainstream. First, know your farmer. Know who is producing your food. Visit their farms. And we say in the movement, seeing is believing. If you see the effects of agroecology, you will begin to understand. Grow food yourself. Talk to your neighbors. Organize. This is one of the most beautiful aspects of being human, is to connect with nature and to feed other people. I think also we can never avoid the fundamental role of protest and direct action. Sometimes we have to get out into the streets and make our voices heard. Building strategic alliances is necessary. We have to not only organize between movements, but we have to also understand the crucial role of communicators and journalists in this work. So we have to tell our stories. We have to tell specifically the success stories of our work. So in conclusion, just listen to us, work with us, and walk with us. We have the solutions. You just have, governments have to listen. Thank you.
Madeline, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So the government is listening here. Now, I just wanted to add on this question, because I made a bit the same experience also in our ministry, that sometimes it's still difficult also for my colleagues to understand what agroecology is and what components it has. We made a study comparing our agriculture policy instruments with the 13 agroecological principles to see how comparable our policy is with the agroecological principles. When I started this process, my colleague said, of course, we will just foster with our agriculture policy the agroecological principles of the lower level, because we are an agriculture policy. So of course, we are targeting like the farm and the field level. But this analysis showed that we had a huge impact also on the entire food systems with our agriculture policy. And I think this was a very beautiful process also for the awareness raising, to share, to discuss, to see how the agroecological approach really implies or has an impact on the entire food system. And I think the second point that is needed also to convince the people outside of the bubble is to make it also more measurable. I mean, you mentioned the metrics, Yasmin. So I think this is also an important part. We need to see when we apply the agroecological principles at farm, field, landscape level in the food system, what progress can we make, what indicators do we have to measure that, to get a picture, because there is no, I would say there is no advance in policy making without concrete metrics and measurements to measure the progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have lots of questions in the room now as well, and I do think maybe we'll take the questions, hear some concluding remarks from Daniel, and then continue the conversation in the room, just because we're basically out of time now. So here, we'll take the 4 questions in the spirit of kind of conversation and dialogue and what we need to bring forward. And then here's some concluding remarks. So please go ahead, right here in the front.
Thank you so much. My name is Slami Ngwenya. I come from South Africa. One question, I've been following, the agroecology initiative, and I'll be implementing one soon. The principles are very clear, but what I'm looking, it's that, in practice, there is an inclination to equate agroecology with organic farming. So a lot of people, it's like agroecology, organic farming, and yet organic farming is one of, the pathways. So I want to know, why is there an inclination to actually equate agroecology to organic farming? And because if that is the case, and this is what you hear a lot of people who are implementing, and I think that is misleading, because it picks one pathway which is part of it and equate it to that. So I find that, as a missing link is a gap, and it's actually misleading.
Thank you. And maybe I'll just speak to this very briefly, which is, of course, there are other approaches, or like organic, or some regenerative. I think the idea, and other natural farming in India, as long as the 13 principles and the 10 elements there's progressive realization, to use a common language, toward those principles. I think agroecology is encompassing of these approaches, but it's the principles that really are the sort of guiding approach and definition, that provide definitional clarity for this work.
No, I actually agree with you with that, but in practice, you hear people always, when you say agroecology is organic farming, and the limiting of agroecology, equating it to organic farming, I think it's kind of, problematic, yeah.
Comments or questions too, so right behind.
Sí, gracias. En la línea de lo que ha dicho el compañero de Kentucky, compañero de Vía Campesina como yo soy agricultor ecológico en España. No vamos a inventar la rueda de nuevo. Si inventamos la rueda de nuevo, no vamos a contar con las organizaciones de campesinos y de pueblos indígenas. De nuevo, no vamos a tener en cuenta sus saberes y sus conocimientos. De nuevo, va a ser el camino para que Bayer, que lo nombre, ha invertido 2.800 millones de euros para recuperar 10.000 millones de euros, porque esa es la lógica, ¿no? Sin embargo, si la visión de que el compañero Ibrahim Coulibaly de Mali decía claramente en este mismo foro, delante de todos los gobiernos, es decir, nosotros sabemos producir, Nosotros tenemos el conocimiento, tenemos las semillas. Fortalezcan las políticas públicas y los fondos de inversión, si quieren aportar al gobierno, para los consensos de políticas con los campesinos y campesinas y con toda la estructura de la administración, como Víctor con honestidad nos está diciendo, en esa lucha en medio del océano de ese lenguaje dominante. Y sin regulación de mercados, sin construcción de precios dignos y justos. Y eso quiere decir lo que ha dicho Taylor. Mercados locales, potenciación de compras públicas, estar permanentemente contraponiendo toda esa fuerza dominante sin regulación de mercados. Había una pregunta de los tratados. Es claro que eso es lo que expulsa a campesinos, los tratados de libre comercio. Ese modelo de comercio, insisto, la autonomía que he dicho, el fortalecimiento de las organizaciones campesinas, la formación de los jóvenes, pero no desde conocimientos que vienen del planeta Marte, sino desde los conocimientos que tienen en el territorio de forma sostenible, que es difícil, absolutamente, que es complejo, lo sabemos. Pero ese es los caminos precisamente que tenemos que recorrer, ¿no?
Thank you. I think that's a good note to actually end on. I really appreciate that comment. And Daniel Moss is co-director of the Agroecology Fund and a close collaborator on this work, and he'll offer just a few short concluding remarks. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, there's a lot of work to do, as we heard from our colleagues here and online, but we also heard significant advances in the conversations, significant advances in the commitments. So I just want to end by, well, looking at both sides of the coin, to relish, to celebrate this significant, I think, development with the kind of cohesion, the interest, the growing clarity about the importance of agroecology and investments in agroecology, at the same time as we know just how much work needs to be done, both in terms of financial investment, but change in political policies and the need for all of us to work together in that. So with that, I just want to thank you all online and here in the audience for joining us and for being part of this ongoing work. We know we have a lot of actors here, and it's been a fantastic job of organizing, doing a lot of peer conversations to grow this commitment. At the same time, we know there's a lot of people missing as well, and we're certainly committed to continuing to recruit, to organize, as the gentleman says, to grow this network in support of agroecological transitions. So with that, I just want to thank Emile, Jasmine, Victor, Madeline, Tyler, Lauren. Thank you very much.